Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this webinar today on values-based communication. We are so excited that you've chosen to join us for this conversation. As we know, 2020 has given us just a series of unprecedented challenges and obstacles that have just really drastically changed the way we need to operate our apartment communities and the way we communicate with our residents and our employees. So today we're going to do a deep dive and take a look at what are the best ways to first define those values, and then also how do we best communicate them. So before we kick off, I'm going to quickly introduce you to our panelists today. I'm so excited they've been able to join us. First, we have Chase Harrington, President and COO at Entrata, Dru Armstrong, CEO of Grace Hill, and Charlotte Flores, VP of HR at BH Management. Thanks, everybody.
Glad to be here.
Great. So first, let's kick off by talking about some best practices when you're defining organizational values. Where do you start? Dru, would you like to take this one first, and then we'll pivot over to Charlotte and Chase?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question. And, I think there are organizations like Entrata that I really admire because I feel like they've done such an amazing job for a decade, really defining and adhering to their values. I would say at Grace Hill, it's been a much more organic or loose process. So if you're the person sitting in the audience thinking, oh my goodness, we haven't put pen to paper on our values, or, the ones that we have in place today don't necessarily match the culture of our organization. I think the Grace Hill story is probably for you. When I became CEO of Grace Hill had operated for 15, 16 years. And then we did 2 subsequent acquisitions, which every time you add more amazing team members that have built their own amazing companies over multiple decades, you're kind of back into that melting pot of culture. And so I think about 2 years ago, we said, it's really time for us to put pen to paper because we're onboarding a lot of new people. And we felt like our culture had evolved to a new place where we could write it down and then start to live by it. And so my advice is culture, first and foremost, should be the heartbeat of your company, right? And it should match your heartbeat, right? Entrata's values may be amazing, but they're not Grace Hill's values exactly, and they're not BH Management's values. And so I would say being truly authentic and honest about what is your culture and making people feel a part of it. I'd also say it's okay to say, this is where we are, and then this is what we aspire to be, right? Especially if it still feels kind of within reach of where you are today. So I won't get into the full process that we went through, but I would encourage people to make sure that it's very inclusive. And so you're really hearing the voice of the team, because ultimately they're going to be the ones that really will adopt it if it feels authentic, and then we'll communicate it to others that join the team throughout the process.
I love that. You touched on this a little bit in your answer, Dru, but Charlotte, I was wondering if you'd give us more details on who should be involved in this conversation. Who do you identify as, here's our committee, who should we include?
You have to have, it starts with, your leadership teams or your executive teams, and looking at, is this, these are the things that we're saying are important, whether that's, to our company, to our culture. These are the things that we want to, standards we want to continue to operate under, or words we want to live by, those types of things. I think that's where it starts. It is important to then kind of always have a pulse on what your employees are saying. So this may be the values that, we're saying that our company, these are the things we value as a company, or this is how we want our culture to be for our organization. And then without getting kind of that pulse, just continuously, it may not be what your employees are experiencing, or maybe they've got suggestions or ways to kind of help that, carry that throughout the company. But definitely, I think it's, having your leadership teams on the same page, because they're promoting that, and then that does trickle through all of your teams throughout your company.
Great. Chase, do you have anything to add to this, or you could talk about maybe how we set goals as an organization?
Yeah, I first and foremost love what both both have said so far and agree holistically. I like what Dru talked about, and I would add to that in that, Entrata, I think we're known in the industry for our values and kind of our culture, but we weren't always, right? Like that was a strategic decision that was made as an organization. And we were in that place that many listening may be in, that we hadn't defined them. We didn't know who we were. We didn't know what we wanted our values to be. And I think the biggest step in it is making the decision that you want that, right? And just saying, you know what, we're ready as an organization, no matter where it may be. And we had operated for years without it. But we recognized that there was, I think we came together as leaders and it was like, something's missing, right? And we didn't know what it was. And then we really started to realize through a couple different experiences that it was culture, and kind of coming to both what both said earlier, both Dru and Charlotte, who should be included. We were really adamant everyone should be included, right? It really has to be a collective effort or it doesn't work. And I think that comes down to the authenticity that Dru kind of talked about, because if it's artificial and like, here's what we want as executives, this is it, and you try to push it, if people don't want it, it's not going to work, right? And it's not going to be the values they stand by. And so it's absolutely critical that they have a voice in that process. And I think for us, that's why it has worked so well, is that voice was so well heard that it really embodied everybody. And we've been able to get the entire organization moving behind these values and this culture because they all believe in it and they're all a part of it. And part of that was the goals kind of that you alluded to. And we had to set goals very early on, both as a business, but also for culture, right? It doesn't happen overnight, right? It is not something that it's like you all get in a meeting and you're like, all right, everybody, here's the new culture. And then it just happens, right? It is a process that takes time. It takes effort. There should be milestones set. And we're still changing and adapting to it, right? I mean, it was a couple years into our kind of after we had decided our values that we eliminated our Employee of the Year program and created a values program, right? Where you nominate people for living the values. And we've constantly found those pieces within the business that needed to change to continue to drive the goal of culture, and define who we were and what we wanted. But I think without having some of those goals, it would have been really difficult. And so I think we had both short term of how do we implement this? What does it look like? What are we changing? And then we had long term of now that we have them, what does it mean, right? Like, what are we going to do with it? And those were not short term, we're done, right? Like, check the box, it's over, right? There were some long-term things that were just going to take time to adapt and to morph with it.
Well, and just to jump in, so they say that it takes a new CEO on average 7 years to shift the culture of the company that they lead, right? And that's at the very top. And then they also say that the number one reason acquisitions fail is for culture mismatch. And so I used to joke at Grace Hill that like, sometimes culture felt like it was like the parts that we were trying to change. So, and I'll be totally transparent, there were times where we felt very siloed, right? We'd built strength in different departments, but by building strength, we'd built them further apart versus closer together. And then you're like, how are we so right? So part of your, your culture and your values is trying to constantly, it's kind of like a gym membership and a diet where you're constantly working at it. And you're like, when am I done with this? And I used to joke, it was like, is it something in the carpet? Is it in the vents? Because, I think it's that true north that, you're always trying to play the short-term, mid-term, long-term game. And if you feel like there are things you want to work on, just know it can take, a decade, right? It can take many years to really get the culture fully headed in that direction.
And change is hard, right? I mean, I think that's one of the things I think we experienced is change is not easy and it doesn't come overnight. But one of the big things was the willingness for people to change. And I think that vision and goal is what will drive the change, because it's like, okay, I know why we're doing this. And there has to be the willingness. I love what you shared, Dru. There has to be the willingness to like look within the organization and say, this isn't working, right? And if we're not willing to do that, we're never going to drive the change.
Right.
When you think about culture too, I mean, you're establishing that, and that's, I mean, it's a tangible thing, right? Like this is essentially this is the vibe of your company that you're talking about, that's what everybody either, flows with or not. So, I mean, you're also saying that these are the things you want, or this is the culture, and you're getting that with employees and everybody's involved. But you're also going back, and as your company grows and evolves, like at least for BH, we've found that over the last few years, it has shifted. I mean, it's, because we're constantly, that culture of constant feedback and wanting to make sure that, we're in line, as much as we want, everybody else to be in line with, that as things change, we're changing with it in the right way. They're in a positive way. So I think that's kind of where it really does take everybody to make sure that you're not just drawing a line in the sand and saying, this is us and that's it, and that's never going to change.
Go ahead, Drew.
Yeah, and I would say, I think one of the things that, I admire about what Entrata has done in talking with you, Chase, but it's really important is kind of once you land on your values, right, or your, culture statement, whatever that is, the better that you can operationalize that, the better you can drive the change, right? And just to make it really specific, you can make hiring decisions based on that. You can make promotion decisions based on that. You can have performance conversations, right? Because part of what actually forced, or, part of why we wrote our values down was, on one hand, we felt like there was mantras that people were saying. So we did a couple acquisitions and we did some partnerships, and we would say #BetterTogether as kind of a rallying cry around embracing the new and embracing new people, new ideas, new partners. And then on the flip side, we'd also see people making decisions and saying, oh my gosh, how could they have done that? How could they have made a customer feel that way or not prioritize the customer? And we were like, oh, maybe they just don't understand, like, that's our value. That's what they have to live by. And if it's totally cool if they don't want to, it's just, this isn't for you. And so I think the better and clearer you are and more succinct, then everyone knows, right? And they can know that that isn't for them, right? Depending on what your culture is, the whole point is to kind of pull the people like for like together. And those that aren't going to fit, right? There's a million amazing places to work, right? Let them know that as well.
And it's okay,
totally
right?
Okay.
Right. Yeah. I think that was one of the things with us that we, that you bring up, Dru, is over time we morphed where literally our interviews, we ask values questions in the interview. Right. So what does this value mean to you? How does it apply to you? In our annual reviews, everyone is asked, how are you living the values? And give us the example of how you best lived it this year, right? And so we've totally incorporated it into that. And I think it's critical that it has to stay on top of mind, because it is so easy. Culture is the first thing that can slip. Right. Because if it's not continually fed, it's one of those things that doesn't stay stagnant, right? It's either moving forward or backwards. And the moment you stop feeding it, it starts moving backwards. And I think that forward momentum and constantly making those changes is critical, as well as your leaders have to embrace it, right? The leaders have to embody it. They have to talk about it. They have to incorporate it into, their meetings and to that point, reviews and hiring. And it's the only way that you create this true culture. Otherwise, what we often see is it just turns into kind of what you stated, a mantra, right? It's kind of like, it's just this catchphrase, right? But it didn't change the business. It didn't change the people. And it's those pieces that will really help drive that.
Can I ask a question, Sam? You mind?
Yes, of course.
I think one of the things that we've seen this year that has made this year really challenging is, is just stress, right? I think everyone's incredibly stressed out. And I think one of the things that our industry thrives on is relationships and being together and getting opportunities to kind of come together and celebrate and discuss and share. And I think that's true inside companies and outside of companies. It's one of the things that you constantly hear about why people never leave multifamily. And I think this year has, both with all the external stresses and pulling away those opportunities, has made it really, really challenging. And so I'd love to hear from Charlotte and Chase, what did you guys do culture and values wise as things started to fray or got challenging within your teams to kind of bring them back to, these are our values, this is how we operate, this is why we love our culture, even if right now it can feel really challenging?
Go for it, Charlotte.
Sure. We spent a lot of time noticing that, right, everyone is just kind of weary, right? At some point it was just, there was no more talk about new normal or any, it was like, this is it and we're in it, and it, for the foreseeable future, this is what it's going to be. Taking a step back, and, we talk a lot about our employees being, the most valuable asset, and it's what are we doing to give them in terms of resources or support them through all of the different things that are happening now. And it was looking at kind of the whole employee, the overall wellness, not just, how are things going with, eviction moratoriums and payment plans and all of the things that were happening on site, but I mean, what's going on with you too? Like, we try to be very aware of all of the employees we have that have kids that are doing virtual learning, and trying to come up with alternate schedules and ways to help them balance that, because that's real, and it carries over. Your personal spills over into work and vice versa. So just trying to get really creative with other ways to support, other than saying, hey, here's our EAP, or here's, if you need to talk to somebody, here are the resources, but really looking at what can we change? Can we offer alternating schedules? Can we extend, office hours to allow to accommodate for some of the things that are happening? Are there other positions that typically haven't been remote that we could make that work remote? And so we asked all of our employees, we asked what they were dealing with, what they thought would help. And then we took it from there, like, here are the suggestions we're getting. What can we really make happen? So you're kind of, walking the talk. Like, we're not just saying we care, we really do care.
I love this question, Dru. I get really excited about it and I can't hold it back. So we like, as you guys know, and we talk about this, values and culture is it is king for Entrata. It is how our business operates. It's how we interact with customers. And the bright side through this for us was that we feel like our values were put to the test in COVID, and that we survived the test. And that was what was really exciting. Our teams came together incredibly well. And to your point, Dru, we thrive on relationships and interactions. Like, our sales team, everybody we have, it's who we are, right? It's kind of our personality in the industry. We love that. And we had to very quickly pivot, right? I mean, everything was thrown out the window. And we have a values committee internally. So once we created the values, we have this values committee where team members come together and they help us continue to live the values internally. And they provide the ideas and things like that. Our marketing team really helps it with the outside and what we're doing, in the industry. And so both of those had to pivot, right? Hopefully people had the opportunity to attend and try to connect. That was our effort, really, to help connect the industry and provide those external connections that we weren't getting, right? We tried to make it fun. We tried to, get up and dance and move with Dr. Dance, and, and just provide that hour in October that everyone had the opportunity to get up and to be free. And if you noticed, that entire conference was around our values, right? Every day focused on a different value, and every session, whether it was from the fun to the actual technology or the inspiration of the speaker, it all tied back to the fundamental of the value. Internally with our employees, we pivoted. One of our big values is business in the front, party in the back. We like to say we pivoted to business in the front, party in the parking lot, because we did a lot in our parking lot over COVID. We turned our parking lot into a drive-in movie theater. And we allowed all the employees to come socially distance with their families, and just get out, right? And watch a movie. And we had a hot dog stand and hamburgers that they could drive through and get safely, feed their family, and just have a night to let go and forget, right? We have done the drive-through kind of concept came on early. We were supposed to have a big employee lunch. Everyone was excited about it. It was a couple weeks after we had to close the office down. And so we brought all the vendors in and we said, we're doing a drive-through. We're not going to cancel. We're not going to stop it. We're not going to let this change our culture. And we still had it, right? Granted, it had to change. We weren't all together in one room, but we had our whole HR team dressed and masked up out in the cold, directing traffic through the line and handing out family bundles of hot dogs and hamburgers and chips and drinks, that they could do that, right? And so we didn't let it stop. And I think that the values committee and the employees were pivotal in coming up with some of these ideas, right? We just did a drive-through for Halloween where the kids had spots to get candy as they drove through the parking lot. And we handed out pizza for them, not frozen pizzas, but Papa Murphy's fresh jack-o'-lantern pizzas for them to take home and cook in the oven, right? I think we handed out like 1,000 pizzas. And they drove through and we handed them out. And now, maybe surprise to the employees, we haven't announced it. We're doing the same thing at Christmas, and we're going to have a lighted drive-through with some exciting things that the families can come enjoy to get out. And even though they may not physically be in the parking lot together, outside of their cars, the feedback we're getting from employees was it was just so good to be in the parking lot with 50 other people waving out our windows, knowing they're still alive and not seeing it over a screen. Right. And it really has re-energized them and I think brought some life to it. The creativity through this period has been really cool. We're creating a cookbook where all the employees are submitting recipes. And so we'll have one of our values is Be the Joneses. So we're going to have a Jones family cookbook where they can cook, the recipes of their friends at home while they're all stuck at home, and just, I think taking some of those pieces, I think sometimes we think it has to be way bigger than it is. And it's the thought. I mean, even in these instances, it's the thought that matters, and that we didn't let the situation just cancel culture. Right. Even though we couldn't be together and we couldn't be face to face, we still found a way to facilitate it. And I think for the employees, it just proved the resiliency of the business to be able to make those decisions and continue with that quote unquote true north of who we are. And that no matter the circumstance, it's not going to change. We're going to figure it out. We're going to do it. And they're going to be a part of it.
That's fantastic. You guys have pretty much worked through a lot of my questions.
I know. I want, it's like, I'm always like, man, I want to get all the Entrata employee perks.
I know.
It's like, oh my God, jack-o'-lantern pizzas. Like you had me.
I'm trying to figure out how you make that work in multiple states. Like, how can we do this when we're not all in one place? Like,
so,
logistically.
It's actually funny. So we have employees in all the states, and I will tell you that is the hardest part. But what they've been doing, what we've been trying to do is package the experience and ship it to them.
Oh, that's cool.
Right.
Oh, I love
so
that.
they may not have been able to get the Papa Murphy's pizza, but we could send them a gift card to go buy pizza for their family. And we put a bag of popcorn and, like a voucher to rent a movie and put it in a box, and we shipped it to them. Right. Everyone that came through the drive-through got a couple swag items. We love our swag. Right. So they got an Entrata blanket. So we sent them the blanket, a bag of popcorn, some vouchers, and kind of it was their own movie in. We also even facilitated, I forgot about this, for some of the employees, we facilitated a Netflix party where they all log in and watch the movie at the same time. So Netflix has that ability to do it.
Nice.
So even though they're all remote, they all can kind of log in and do it together. So I think it's just, again, I didn't know these things. This was not Chase, right? This was the values committee and our employees who are involved coming up with these ideas, and they love it, right? I mean, and that was just kind of honestly a few of the pieces to your point, Charlotte. Health and mental wellness is critical. And so we did a virtual 5K where everyone recorded themselves running a 5K on their own, and we put a video together. They all videoed with their iPhones and sent it in, and we put together a video and everyone watched it, and it was just like we had one all together. right? But everyone got to participate in it, and we focused on those different aspects of wellness. And I think that the employees appreciate the 5K. I mean, that's like free, guys, right? It wasn't this huge expense for Entrata. Frankly, when we were doing these drive-throughs, we were able to give them more in these drive-through situations than we were had we catered it at the office.
Yeah.
When you started looking at it financially, and it was like, this totally makes sense from a business perspective, which I know always comes in of, we don't have the budget to do all these massive things. Guys, we do this on a shoestring budget, right? This is not this massive line item in our budgets as though it may seem it, but we make it a bigger deal than it may cost. Right. And it's the feeling, and it's the people, and it's the gathering. I mean, it was literally 1,000 pizzas stacked on the sidewalk that we handed out, right? And we would have bought those to cater internally as well. And so the price was no different. And it was, safe, and it was valid. And so I just think there's always those creative ways, but your employees know, right? They have those ideas, and harnessing and allow them to do that. And then they want to participate. They want to be a part of it. They love the idea. There's that pride of, that was me. Like, I did that, right? And I think that is what kind of continues to fuel it and speed it through.
Well, and I think one thing that is kind of unsaid in what you're saying, but is worth just kind of stating is, I think just the fact that with everything going on, so much of strategy is just prioritization, right? And I think both of what you, Charlotte, said and what you, Chase, said is, given all of the challenges of COVID that have presented themselves for the business, the message that you can send to your team that they come first, whether you're doing that, however you do that, right? And the fact that you're really demonstrating that value to them and their value, right? You're reflecting that back. I think that's also super powerful and reaffirming that if you really think culture and your employees come first and that they are your most valuable asset, the fact that throughout this environment, you guys have been able to put them first, I think that's super powerful.
And I think one of the pieces we did, sorry, Sam, I know you're about to jump in again, was, one of the things that I will tell you we have found that is helpful is we've been very transparent with our employees through the transitions.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. I have done more video messages than probably in the last 10 years of my career in the last 10 months. Right. And we've tried to allow the employees to stay connected via seeing and hearing from us, whether it's video, it's email, it's newsletters, and kept the messaging going at a regular pace, as well as being transparent. We told them, look, things are going to change. COVID and a pandemic is changing the business. It doesn't have to change who we are. And here's what we're committed to doing, right? We're committed to protecting jobs, protecting your pay, and there will be other changes that will help us facilitate doing that. And I think we were transparent in that, where there were things, our office was kind of a giant playground, for lack of a better term, right? Where we had all these fun perks in it, and all of them are gone, right? Because COVID wiped it out. But we were transparent in saying, look, we're wiping those out for right now to protect you. And I think there was this understanding, and it also showed our true intent, to your point, Dru, to keep them first, and that we are making these business decisions for you and on behalf of you. And sometimes they're painful, right? I mean, I don't think there's a business out there that hasn't had to make a painful business decision in this pandemic. Yeah. Right. But I think the transparency and communicating the why has really helped people to understand we get it. Right. And I think through that and our culture, it's really brought us closer together as a company, even though we're physically further apart.
We're close to the end of the time, but I wanted to ask one more question. How do you guys, and you've covered this a little bit, but how do you tie all of these efforts back to company success or resident success? How do you know when you're on the right track and your message is really being soaked in by not just your associates, but also your clients or your residents?
We've seen things shift with culture in a positive way over the last few years. And I think that's one of the ways that, we're, again, right, we've got a culture of constant feedback. We encourage it, we want it, we seek it out. And so just, tangible ways to see that we've we've made steps in the right direction because we're seeing that change and we're seeing the feedback that we're getting. And there's always the moment where you realize when you're sitting and looking at strategic initiatives or, upcoming year, what does that mean in 2021, where you're not just checking a box like Dru mentioned about, with culture or values. You're incorporating that into all of the things that you're doing. And it's kind of it's just started to be very organic. It's not a constant like, well, let's think about our values say this and this initiative here. It just starts to flow where it's just embedded. And I think seeing that happen is another way where it kind of just all comes together, where you realize you're on the right track.
For us, there's a combination of things. One, I think that you have to be willing and accept that you can't measure all aspects of culture, right? And I think that if there's the commitment to it, there's the feeling and that it's contributing to your overall success without trying to put a return on every decision within culture. And I think that that's critical, right? There's the commitment to it regardless. Now, there are aspects you can measure, which I think are also important. Employees probably are like, wait, Chase is saying we can't measure it, because I'm a huge, let's measure and figure out return and do it. But I do think that there's an aspect that it's a feeling and it's a culture. And the way that we really look at that to measure it is we do extensive NPS scores of our customers. And we see their satisfaction. We contribute their satisfaction to how happy our employees are. Happy employees make happy customers, right? And we know that there's a direct tie there. And so I think that's one way, as well as the comments are completely, they just validate. Reading through them of like, we love working with your people, they're so happy, or they were excellent to me, and they're quoting our culture back to us. That's validation for us that it's working, right? It's having an impact. They see it, they feel it to the point that they can quote it. We also do that internally. So in our annual reviews, we take an NPS score of our employees. And where is their happiness? Is the culture impacting their happiness? And if our NPS score is coming down, that's indicative that our culture is coming down. Right? Now, you're always going to have blips as a business where maybe a department or an area is struggling, but we really look at it holistically and where is that satisfaction across the group? And as long as we're keeping those scores high, we directly know and can correlate our sales and our business to high NPS scores, right? And so it's pretty simple, and the tracking or the measurement of it for us, it's those NPS scores, which we think have a very large downfall effect into the business as well.
I totally agree with Chase. I mean, we also look, and if you don't do NPS surveys, that's fine with your customers. We also just look at retention, right? As a core metric, like, do they continue to stay with us year after year? And honestly, since we focused on culture, we've seen massive improvements in our retention, right? That's been a core focus for our business overall. And so we're at best in class levels. And I attribute that, just like Chase did, to our team and our team paying forward their enthusiasm. The second piece that I would say is you can also look at, are you able to hire the people you want to hire? And do you keep the team members you really want to keep? Because part of how people vote ultimately is with their feet, and top talent can work pretty much anywhere, right? I think even in this environment, right? Even with unemployment higher than it was when we entered the year. And so I think you also look at, are my culture carriers choosing to stay, right? And so I think that's some of the ways that you can measure the impact of culture. And then some of it's just less scientific, right? I mean, I think part of a leader's job is to constantly be taking the pulse of the team and sensing where are they, and being able to be nimble and adaptive so that you're responding. I mean, I think there have been really hard weeks, right? And there have been hard conversations between teams. And I think, being willing to remind everyone, this is our culture. And part of our culture is, being able to lift each other up when we're having a hard time, right? Kendall and I always joke that we can both have bad days. They just can't be on the same day. Because our job is to pick each other up and, that's part of business. It's a team sport. And I think culture and values let you make sure that you have the right team on the field. Even when at times it can feel like you're losing, right? It's more fun when you're winning, but culture and values really matters when you're challenged and under pressure. And so I think it's okay also if some of this is just intangible and you're kind of feeling it out, and then ultimately stepping your way to where you can do a more systematic pulse NPS type program to really, really measure it.
Right.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great area to just wrap up. Thanks so much, you guys. I know that we could keep talking about this for another, 45 minutes or probably more. But in the world of COVID, we know that we all have yet another Zoom to attend. So,
So true.
It is very much so.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for joining this webinar on values-based communication. We hope that you found it helpful. And if you have questions on anything, I encourage you to reach out to these panelists directly. They are, as you can tell, a wealth of knowledge.